Throughout the 80s, considering that there is still a divergence and fragmentation which does not produce a single science model in which everyone can rely, they began to build a kind of approximation. Realists are beginning to adapt their analysis model a little in order to incorporate the fundamental elements of liberal thought. Liberals will also begin to modify their thinking a bit to add some ideas that are very important for the starting point of realistic thinking. Liberals make the biggest concessions. They give up a little of the idea of complex interdependence and begin to accept two fundamental premises of realist thought: the idea of anarchy as a priority structure, since the context in which international relations operate is the context marked by anarchy. We have cooperation and different actors, but the main one is the state. The state is not the only actor, but it is more important than the other actors. Thus, they come to have the same view on the system and on the unit, and it is possible to build hypotheses that can be measured against each other. The fundamental concession the realists make is that they leave this structural narrative about having only one pattern of functioning that repeats itself over time. Moreover, the objective of knowledge is not to know this structure, but to explain the behavior of the units. Both realists and liberals will carry out a new joint research program where they have different hypotheses but seek to explain the same. How do the basic units, the state, make choices in a context of anarchy? What stimulates these choices and what tragedies emerge from this interaction in this space marked by anarchy? So these thoughts are not the same, but they are close. The structure and the basic unit are the same. The difference is in understanding how that unit makes choices within that framework. Here, the main difference between realist and liberal approaches is the distinction between absolute and relative gains. Considering that the objective of knowledge becomes to understand how the laws that govern the functioning of the international concretely impact the functioning of certain states, realists propose hypotheses in which states' tragedies are supported by relative gains. This means that the state makes choices about whether or not it will cooperate based on if others will earn more or less. For example, I enter a cooperative structure, such as the European Union, and gain something and have a perspective of sustainable growth. The implication, I observe, is that the forces involved in that agreement earn more than I do, and they tend to benefit more systematically than I do, and can use it to embarrass me and use it against me. If I think that way, I would tend to be resistant to cooperation unless I am the privileged actor. Liberals understand that states make many of their choices in terms of absolute gains. They tend to look at how much they will earn tomorrow compared to what they have today, rather than what they will earn compared to what the other will earn. This understanding of gain guides my decision internationally. How do actors act strategically? From game theory, we have the idea that an action can depend on the action of others. Applied to international relations, there is no point in developing a theory of strategic action based on just one actor. It needs to observe how actors coordinate expectations and make choices based on them. Here we have a reflection on the prisoner's dilemma. The thought experiment goes as such. Two criminals are in separate cells, unable to communicate. The police do not have enough evidence to sentence both without further evidence. The police offered the prisoners a deal. They can accuse each other of the crime with the following conditions. If both prisoners say the other did it, each will serve 2 years in prison. If one says the other did it and the other stays silent, the prisoner will serve 3 years and the accuser 0. If both prisoners stay silent, each will serve 1 year in prison. In game theory, altruistic behavior, staying silent, is called cooperating, while accusing the other is called defecting. What should they do? If they were able to communicate and they trusted each other, the rational choice is to stay silent. That way, each serves less time in prison than they would otherwise. But how could each know the other won't accuse them? After all, people tend to act out of self-interest. The cost of being the one to stay silent is too high. The expected outcome when the game is played is that both accuse the other and serve 2 years. So why is this dilemma important? It allows us to realize that what conditions behavior is the expectation of the behavior of others. Game theory helps us to understand the problem of anarchy in a different way. Anarchy is no longer a reflection on the state of nature and on the possibility of violence. Anarchy becomes a configuration that produces uncertainty about the behavior of the other. It increases the degree of uncertainty about the possibility of cooperation between actors. For the liberal, we have a fundamental contribution to how we think about the problem of international institutions. How does the realist see the problem of institutions? It's not that institutions don't exist. They exist and are important. They have autonomy and are part of a power project. NATO, for example, only makes sense within the bipolar logic of the Cold War and within the need to stop the Soviet advance. Without this configuration, creating NATO would not make sense from the point of view of the effort made in cooperation between countries. For example, we have a cause that makes sense within the power project to which they are submitted, but outside of the dynamic of this project, this type of cooperation would not be so successful. For the liberal, what is the use of this institution? It serves to produce mechanisms and processes that allow these same actors to circumvent this uncertainty structurally produced by anarchy. If the structure is useful, if it facilitates communication between actors, create efficient cooperation channels, and creates norms that help certain spaces to cooperate and form integrated policies, this institution persists even if the configuration of power that made it possible changes at some point. If we don't have that, if the institution only works because it is supported by the power of the hegemonic force and its interests, from the moment the hegemonic force shifts, this institution tends to fail. This is important because it proposes an alternative to how you think about the way the institution works, as well as a very big shift from letting go of the kind of narrative produced by normative political liberalism in the early 20th century. That's all. Thanks for watching.